It's a warm welcome to you, the listener and the viewer out there. This is another exciting edition of the Professional Plumber Podcast, and it's a technical podcast for that matter. Now, my name is Willem. I'll be your host, but for the technical podcast, I never roll alone. I always go together with my partner in crime, Mr. Richard Bailey. Richard, a warm welcome to you as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, Willem. Thanks for hosting us again, or hosting me again. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Richard, again this morning, a technical discussion. Today we are specifically looking at using the correct materials for underground drainage. And I think that there's a lot that can be said about it.
Yeah, no, there's a huge amount. I mean, often these podcasts, subject matter of the podcasts that we do seem to be sort of ho-hum, well, what on earth does that, why bother talking about this sort of thing? But it's amazing how often you come across out in the field, if you go and do audits and so on, like I do, like a lot of us do, how often you come across simple mistakes and small mistakes have unintended, quite large consequences. And so I thought it important to touch on the importance of using materials, in this case underground sewage and sewage systems that are designed for that purpose, and what can go wrong if you don't do it, if you change tack or use something else or try and MacGyver something, So yeah.
MacGyver, I like that word.
Yeah.
Listen, Richard, before we go
we've seen many MacGyvers, don't you worry. There are MacGyvers out there.
I'm sure as an auditor you come across a lot of things that guys made plans that are not quite compliant.
Yeah.
Richard, before we go into the details of the conversation, let's just cross over to some ads. Let's take a quick ad break. To our viewers and our listeners out there, don't go away. We'll be right back after these ad breaks. As a happy new year and welcome back gesture, Articulated offers a heat pump installation course with a whopping 10% discount. Consisting of 7 modules, this course provides knowledge about the types of heat pumps available, the economic benefits of heat pumps, and a basic overview of the SANS 1352 national standard. To expand your knowledge about heat pumps and for a chance to earn yourself 5 CPD points, register for this online course at www.iopsatraining.co.za today.
Are you having questions about the Plumbing Industry Registration Board and the plumbing industry in South Africa? Well, then join us on the couch and in conversation with the industry experts to answer all your lingering questions about the plumbing industry. The PIRB remains committed to ensuring open and consistent communication within the plumbing industry. So, be part of the conversation. Send us your questions on email at communications@pirb.co.za or on WhatsApp on 079 833 6930. Become a part of the conversation today. Hashtag on the couch. Hashtag PIRB.
Welcome back. You are still tuned into a lacquer technical discussion here on the Professional Plumber Podcast with myself and Mr. Richard Bailey. Now, just before we went into the ad break, Richard and I did mention that today we're specifically talking about using the correct materials for underground drainage. Richard, we're talking specifically underground, is that correct?
Yeah, I thought yes. Look, I think there's enough meat on this subject, so to speak, to split it, and we'll definitely have a follow-up podcast doing above ground, and because there are specific performance requirements, and they differ slightly from above to below, and so we will cover above ground in a different one.
You must be careful when you use the word "there's enough meat" around this subject, right? Because we are talking about drainage, sewage pipes.
Listen.
Yeah. So, Richard, okay, why? I mean, thinking about materials and the type of materials to use for underground drainage, why is it an important thing? Why can't you just use any material for that matter? What is so important about it?
Yeah, so when we talk about materials, Willem, you must just remember that we aren't talking about denim versus cotton versus nylon. It's not that sort of material. It is. Yes, one can talk about PVC and the different types of materials used to manufacture fitting. But when we use the generic term materials, we're talking about the types of fittings, the types of pipes, and there are very different. There are very different conditions that a set of pipes and fittings experiences when it's buried underground versus when it's above the ground. So when you select incorrect materials to use, in this case below ground, it can have and it will have an effect on the performance of the system. The system will not perform as it is supposed to, and it will have an effect on the longevity of the system. So it probably won't last as long. And there are various reasons for that. A drainage system, especially, any drainage system and any plumbing system for that matter, but it has so many points of failure, so many points of potential problems that you just need to take every care to be sure that you've covered all the bases. Why take the chance of potentially creating a problem? And of course, we're talking about infrastructure that is vital. I know most of the installations that'll happen by the plumbers and the people that we talk to through these podcasts are probably domestic installations. It's vital in a domestic situation, but think of the bigger picture in terms of sanitation installations. It's vital. You should not be messing around with it. And the fact that it's underground in this particular case it's unseen. One doesn't see it. So problems that arise tend to be there for months, if not years, before they picked up through different symptoms. So you have to wait for a symptom that you experience in your property before you say, hey, there's a problem here. So,
but by the time that you spot that symptom, it's almost too late already because damage is already done.
Exactly. So it has huge knock-on effects.
Richard, okay, so we know now why it's important to choose the correct materials. The performance can be affected if you choose the incorrect materials. The longevity. How do you pronounce that word? Longevity.
Longevity. Yeah.
that can be affected if you use the incorrect words. There are a couple of risks associated with using the incorrect materials for underground drainage. How do we go about in choosing the correct materials?
Willem, there's a few things. First of all, whatever materials you use in a plumbing system or whatever materials you choose to install, they need to be of an approved type. This is the description that the wording that sits in the standards, that the materials, fittings, pipes, etc. that we use must be approved fittings, approved pipes, approved couplings, whatever it is. So what does approved mean? It means that it has been tested to and has met the criteria contained within the specific product standard for that material. In other words, an underground pipe that is designed to be buried at a certain depth or with up to whatever the case may be, it will have been tested to a South African national standard. It will be deemed acceptable, and it will be stamped, let's say, for example, with the SABS mark of approval. So look for an SABS listing when you're choosing materials. If you could look at SA Watermark, you could look at Jaswick, and as long as it's on there, you know that it's an approved type. All else fails, you can contact your local authority to make sure that in your area that this particular material is acceptable. That's the compliant, the compliancy of the material selected. But the suitability of the material is the next thing. So you need to determine what the intended function is of this thing that you're installing. What is the intended function? I'm installing it underground. Am I using an above ground fitting underground? Why is there a difference between an above ground fitting and an underground fitting? And why are there certain... So you've got to determine what you're trying to achieve and select the correct fittings. That you cannot do without looking at, for example, the installation standards for drainage, 10252/2. And if you look at that, there are very many criteria, things that you need to take note of. There's radius of bends, there's restrictions with in terms of connections, how close they are together, etc. I'm not going to get into details, but there's so many rules and regulations surrounding that. So you have to choose a suitable type of system and fitting that you're going to use for underground. You can't chop and change from above ground to below ground. And then, of course, lastly, consult the manufacturer's recommendations. If the manufacturer, because they have to manufacture according to standards and according to certain tests, and if you use a product outside of its intended use or of its intended use, you're going to forego your warranty. You're going to be left in hot water, etc. At the end of it if something does go wrong. So make sure it's an approved product. Make sure it's the right type of product, that you've chosen the type properly, and make sure that you're following manufacturers' recommendations.
I want to shoot a question from the hip here, Richard. You said that we should look at the intended use of it, and that we should look for marks of approval on it, right? So whether it's JASWEEK, SA Watermark, or SABS approved materials. So we know what we're going to use it for, and we know that it's approved, it's been tested for whatever we're going to use it for. But surely in the standards, there should be specifications of what can and what cannot be used for specific installations.
100%. Exactly. That I did allude to that, and because you need to, within your installation standard, you need to know what is allowed and what is not allowed. It's all very good and well using a whole bunch of underground fittings that are in front of you, but you use them in the incorrect manner, in the incorrect configuration. It's not going to work. So it's a whole bunch of things that come and mesh together, Willem, if you can look at it like that. You've selected the correct type of fitting, you've selected an approved one, and you are installing it in an approved way and according to the standards. And that's the only way to ensure. Unfortunately, there's no shortcuts. You can't just take one of those elements away and say, oh, that's okay. There is no shortcuts. Unfortunately, the very, very bare minimum that is to be expected from an installer is 100% compliance. It's as simple as that, Philip. There's no two ways. You can't skimp on this stuff.
As a layperson, I also want to ask Richard. The plumbers may know the answer to this, but from my personal perspective, I want to just ask you quickly: is there such a big variety of materials to choose from? I mean, obviously we're looking at diameters and those kind of things, so we're not talking about size. We're talking about the material, the actual material. Is there such a big variety to choose from, or are they fairly limited?
No, there is, and a lot of it is substandard. I mean, for example, for underground, I'll give you off the top of my head an example. For underground systems, one would need to be able to rod these piping systems, and the requirements in those standards is that they are to be roddable. That means good old-fashioned steel drain rods. I know, and we all know, that there's modern equipment available, such as jetting machines and those spring snakes, we call them, drain snakes, that can get around corners that drain rods cannot. Nonetheless, the requirements in the standards is that everything must be roddable. Not everybody's got access to a drain snake or to a jetting machine.
For sure.
Therefore, it needs to be roddable. So the radius of bends, for example, is a thing. The strength, the material, the mechanical strength of a bend or a change of direction is a thing. Because if you've got a steel drain rod going in there and wanting to go around that bend, and it cannot handle that steel drain rod, it's going to break through.
Absolutely.
So there's 100 examples that I can give you. I know you won't know what I'm talking about specifically now, but I'm going to give you another example which we came across quite recently. I came across it, and the plumbers will know what I'm about to say. I saw a sewer line from a new bathroom being connected to an existing sewer line underground, buried by means of a jolly flex. Now, a jolly flex, at the best of times, should not be used, even in its intended space. But this was underground, and I'm not going to elaborate because there isn't time. But those listening to this will know exactly what I'm talking about. And the frequency that we find this kind of mistake happening is often. And using above ground fittings underground is also a problem because of the radius of the bends. And it's not designed to work like that.
Richard, I think there's a lot more meat to this conversation. But before we get to that meat, let's just cross over to another quick ad break. For our viewers and our listeners out there, do stay tuned because we'll be right back after this.
Good day, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm here to log in my COCs, but I seem to be having an issue with my computer.
No problem, but did you know that you can log your COCs using an app on your cell phone?
Oh, what app is that?
It's called the App Plumber. Do you have a smartphone with you?
Yes, I do.
Oh well, let me show you how it works.
Not only can you access your PIRB profile on the App Plumber, but you can also earn CPD points while exploring the plumbing industry in the palm of your hand. Download the app from Google Play Store and join thousands of other happy users.
Welcome back. You are still tuned into a lack of technical discussion here on the Professional Plumber Podcast with me and Richard Bailey. Now, today's episode, we are talking about specifically choosing and using the correct materials for underground drainage. And before we went into the ad break, we discussed that why it is important to use the correct materials, and we spoke about how to go about what to consider when we have to choose the correct materials. So Richard, now I want to ask you, we spoke about already why it's important we spoke about why it is important to choose the correct materials for underground plumbing, but you also alluded to a couple of risks that are associated with not using the correct materials. Could you possibly elaborate a little bit more on those? What could go wrong? What risks are associated with using the incorrect material for underground? Especially that, what is it? The jelly...
Jolly flex.
Yeah. I can't believe that one.
Yeah, no, and it's not. Listen, it's not uncommon. We laugh about it. It's not uncommon. You won't believe what we find. You'll find literally thick plastic sheeting or pieces of an old bucket tied around a pipe with some wire. We find it, Willem. So we're not going to go into that. There literally are 1,000 examples I can give you. But let's take a few steps back and let's just think about what is the function of an underground system, an underground sewage system. We've already touched on the fact that it is vital infrastructure. We're talking about people's health here.
Yeah.
People die from lack of sanitation, and that's the cold fact of it. So we have to step up and take responsibility. So an underground system by its very nature, can only be accessed through specially designed and specially installed access points. Because it's underground, it's not accessible. So we have to, as installers, provide these access points, and our access to this thing is limited, obviously. So the rest of the installation between these access points needs to be of a certain design in order to allow for proper cleaning, proper inspection, and certainly proper function, proper drainage and therefore. So because it can't be as easily inspected and monitored as an above ground visible thing. So it's hidden, and you've got to make sure that it's functioning properly. We spoke about the radius of fittings, radii of fittings. Now, again, in a vertical sort of a above ground stack situation, you've got different flow dynamics than you do in an underground system where you've got branch drains joining into main drains. The flow dynamics are completely different. The fittings look different. The fittings, generally speaking, underground have much larger radius than above ground fittings, because they, once again, they need to, some of them need to accommodate drain rods. Others don't. Others, we don't expect them to accommodate drain rods, and there are other ways we get around that. But you cannot interchange these things, okay? Pipes, if you want to talk about pipes, they've been designed to be able to withstand the expected loads and pressures. This ties in again, and I think we'll do a podcast on it, in pipe bedding, how to bed pipes, what the requirements are around how to properly bed pipes in the ground and make sure that they are safe for the expected loads. But these pipes have been designed for that. And believe it or not, Willem, the underground pipes are not as robust as the above ground pipes, because the underground pipes have actually been designed with 360-degree continuous support in mind. So it is being held in place, if you bed it properly, by like 1 million brackets, okay? Whereas the above ground piping is only held in place by intermittent brackets. So you'd think that the underground is stronger, but it's not. The converse is true. Nonetheless, it's been designed to withstand. So what are the problems that one can experience when you get it wrong, or you choose the incorrect fittings, or you choose the incorrect piping? Well, difficulty in access. You can't get to sections of pipe in order to maintain it or clean it or inspect it, for that matter. If you've got a 90-degree bend which is situated underground, I can't get around there with a rod. You can't, and so that's immediately a problem. Pipes collapsing. Again, you can talk about materials of pipes, but there are pipes out there that could be mistakenly used for drainage systems that are simply not suited for it. They are not approved materials, and they're weak, or the incorrect material, or they react with the type of soil, and they collapse, they break, they crack, and so that's obviously a mechanical issue, or a rapid degradation of the piping. And of course, when that starts to happen, you have leaks. And leaks of sewer underground, even though people think, oh, it's underground, it doesn't matter. But I mean, if we disregard that and we just sort of say, oh, well, it's not such a big deal if a little bit of sewage leaches out into the ground. Okay, well, what happens if it's right next to an underground water source? And that water source is, for being used as a water source. So no, it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable. So leakages and that sort of thing is not acceptable. And then, of course, blockages and stagnation. If you don't get your falls right, if you don't put it in properly, you'll have possible blockages and or stagnation. Stagnation is similar to a blockage, but it can be undetectable for many, many years. And what happens is, because you've got stagnant water in a belly, it starts to, there's a formation of aanpaksel, where that's the Afrikaans word. I'm just trying to think of the English word, but it's an accumulation of material which happens, and it can really disrupt your work. But that's the sort of thing that can go wrong. Corrosion. I mean, if you use a metallic sort of pipe underground, it's going to corrode. You know, so the materials and the fittings has to be chosen properly.
But we can also say, all right, so that's some of the risks associated with not, and those are quite severe. I mean, you're talking about a pipe, a drainage, a sanitation pipe leaking underground, and maybe located or situated near or close to, you know, an underground water supply system or natural water supply system, which is, you know, we don't want that to go into that water. But there's also the risk of the potential implications that it can have regarding claims against the plumber.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned, you reiterated what I said about a leakage close to a water source, an underground water source. Did you know, Willem, that and I'm just going to divulge a little bit. Did you know that there is a requirement as to the proximity with which you're allowed to put a water pipe to a sewer pipe? You can't just put them next to one another. So your water pipe has to be above your sewer, okay? And if it's level, it's got to be a certain distance away. So every single day there is a burst pipe somewhere, a main supply in the municipality, a water supply burst pipe in the municipality distribution system somewhere. Maybe 10 a day in the country, or 100 a day, I don't know. But what happens then is that your water pipes can experience a negative pressure. So if you have a slight leak in your water pipe, you can have it sucking whatever is around it. And if it's below a sewage pipe, and that sewage pipe is leaking, well, now it's sucking in sewage, raw sewage, into your drinking water. So we might look at these regulations and say, oh, what are the chances? What are the chances I've got a water leak and a sewage leak? It's possible. The regulations are there, and we cannot flout them. So yeah, you know, if you are seen, if something comes to a head, and let's say you get to court and you got to defend yourself, you then show, you can't show that you've chosen the correct materials, because it wasn't SABS approved, because it was from your local hardware and much cheaper than the SABS approved ones. You got no leg to stand on. Or that you installed it incorrectly, and as a result of your incorrect installation, the pipe collapsed, it caused a leak, it caused a hazard, and somebody got sick, or whatever the case may be. So yes, there are big implications. And if you haven't complied with the requirements in choosing your materials, in choosing your methodology, and in your installation, you've got no leg to stand on. The only way you can defend yourself in a situation like that is to show categorically that you've complied with this, and then you're okay. So it might sound like, I've been a plumber for 33 years. I've been on site. It's been Friday afternoon where I just need to finish this 3-meter section. I'm in a trench and I don't have a fitting. What do? Do I MacGyver and close up and nobody knows? Or do I say, I haven't got this fitting, and my conscience must dictate that, sorry guys, we can't close this trench today because the hardware shop is closed, or whatever the case may be. You've got to make that decision. I've been there. So this is what happens, and it's the reality of the thing. But you will decide for yourself.
The fact is that, you know what, we have to take accountability for what we do and the decisions we make. There are requirements from the standards, and they are there for a specific reason. I reiterate myself in every episode that we have, is that requirements are there to ensure optimal functionality of the installation as well as health and safety of everyone involved or affected by the product and the installation. Richard, I think that is a nice way to conclude it, is to just remind the guys to take pride in what they do and to take accountability for what they do. It's that one decision on that last moment of that Friday afternoon that you decide, you know what, I'm not going to rush to a store now to go and buy this bend. Let me just put another bend in, and that thing then eventually is not suitable. It doesn't function properly or causes a leak for that matter, and somebody's health is affected by it, the consumer's health. So Richard, we've run out of time for this specific episode, and I think we could have delved a little bit more into it, but we have run out of time. So I want to thank you for having joined me, and again for the information, the valuable information that you share with us.
It's only a pleasure, Willem, as always, and we'll look forward to these podcasts. Eh?
Absolutely. I learn from them. Yeah.
You now know what a Jolly Flex is.
I know. I still can't believe that people put that on the ground. It's ridiculous. Listen, Richard, I'm going to say goodbye to you, but to our listeners and our viewers, I want to encourage them to stay. We are going to bring them some industry announcements right after this. We'll see you now.
This year, the PIRB is introducing a CPD rewards program in which plumbers are rewarded for their hard work and for staying up to date with their CPD points. The more CPD points the plumbers earn, the better their rewards. With this program, plumbers will be able to receive discounts on certain items like COCs, renewal fees, and other products, depending on their continuous professional development points. But there's more. Plumbing stakeholders can collaborate with the PIRB to encourage plumbers to develop themselves. Please contact communication@pirb.co.za to find out how you can be involved. The PIRB is committed to ensuring open communication within the plumbing industry. If you need any clarity on plumbing information, please send us your questions via email to communications@pirb.co.za or via WhatsApp to 079 833 6930. Watch the latest episode to see the responses to some of your burning questions.